In this episode, we'll speak to one of the top safety professionals and academics in the United States about the state of safety and the fact that sometimes safe is not safe enough. We'll talk about some of the reasons why this is the case and what needs to be done to make the workplace safer. Up next on Psych Health and Safety USA. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Safety at work is more than freedom from physical injury. To be safe, you have to feel safe. Join us each week as we discuss psychologically healthy and safe work in the USA. Well, this episode is going to be very, very special. Very, very special. First of all, let me share with you for this week's episode of the Psych Health and Safety podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase the awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, expertise, and other great characteristics of our guests, and also to advocate strategies to reduce harm and minimize the vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. Again, this is a really special episode for me. First is the topic, of course. We're going to be talking about the fact that safety and safe may not be safe enough. There may be some conversations that we haven't had around safety that we should, and we're going to have some of them today. But even more important than that is my guest. So for full disclosure, this guest was my advisor, helped me through the journey to complete my PhD in occupational health and safety. And she's become a mentor and a friend. And I'm absolutely honored to be joined by Dr. Linda Martin. She's the host of The Safety Struggle. She's the executive director of Safeland, an academic, a researcher, an author, and an all-around good person. And just glad to have you here. Good day, Dr. Martin. How are you?
Hi, Dr. Daniels. I always have the best time saying Dr. Daniels because to me, I am so proud of your work. I'm so proud of the person that you are and the person that you're becoming in this field. And so I'm really excited to be on your show. I'm a little nervous. I'm not going to lie because I'm used to interviewing other people, but let's see how this goes because I'm super interested in what you're doing with this podcast.
Absolutely. Well, truthfully, it's a little interesting for me too because I can't say I've had a lot of opportunities to. First of all, podcasting is new to me altogether, but I still consider myself an up and coming learner, researcher, that type of thing, and to be in the presence of such greatness and smartness is always very cool. So what I do for all of my guests is I start off with this question in terms of introductions. Who is Linda Martin?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'm in a constant state of becoming, just like you said, right?
Sure.
You're that person that you're still growing in your career, hopefully, right? That's where we all are. I have been many different iterations of myself during my working career. So who is Linda Martin? Who was Linda Martin when she was 20 years old? Linda Martin was a geologist coming out of school thinking she was going to work in the oil fields, right? Linda Martin at 30 years old was an environmental consultant. Linda Martin at 40, coming into a full-fledged safety career, and now in my 50s. Oh, yikes. Now in my 50s, I'm still in a state of growing, right? Growing my practice, growing my client base, growing my knowledge. So, which stage do you want to talk about? Do you want to start at the beginning or
whatever it is you want to share? That's the nice thing about that question. It's it's up to you. Whatever you want to share. It's all interesting to me.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump into psychological safety right away because one of these things that really rings true to me is you mentioned it, right? How safe is safe, right? And how safe is safe for Linda Martin has varied over my career, right? And I'm gonna share some very personal things if that's okay
Sure,
with you.
sure, absolutely.
I came out of college a young gay lesbian professional, right?
Mhm.
In the Midwest.
Mm.
Okay, so let, let's say that that wasn't probably the most advantageous thing or person or way to be in the early 90s, right? In the
Mhm.
early 90s, we still were on that front edge of um, being afraid, right? And I think this is something that on a smaller scale for me, but on a bigger scale for you can resonate, right? Like where do you fit in this professional life, and how do you be a professional when you have personal things that um, are who you are,
Mm.
right? At your core, right?
Right, right.
So one of the first things that I did when I got out of college was I moved away from my hometown. And one of the reasons that I moved away from my hometown was well, it was twofold. It's not that I didn't love my family or any of that other stuff. I had a very loving family, but I really kind of wanted to get to a place where I could be who I was. And the only person that it influenced or, influenced in a negative way was me. I
Mm.
know that sounds silly. It sounds
Mm.
really silly,
Mm.
but I wanted to start my career and to be a person who was out,
Mhm.
okay, in the 90s, which is saying something, right?
That's right.
And and I always had this idea that I was going to be out no matter what, right? Because I grew up knowing that I was a really good person.
Mhm.
Whether I am or not, that's for other people to judge. But in the core of my being, that I was a really good person and that I was like everybody else, except for this difference of
Mhm.
who I love,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so I moved out of the Midwest, partially because of fear,
Mm.
partially because I wanted to be on my own and living my own life. And what I found was I didn't become psychologically safe
Mm.
in the respect that you talk about in your
Mm.
research
Mm.
or in some of your other um, writings and discussions. It was a starting point.
Mm. Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I found was the more I liked myself,
Mm.
which is which is powerful, right? The more I
That's
like
right.
myself, the more other people liked me because they saw me as having the same struggles. 20
Mhm.
something, $5 in my pocket at the end of payday.
Right.
Um, I loved who I was with. I had to work hard to make a living, all those kind of things. And I started my career that way. And I want to say that it helped the moving away and starting just fresh like that. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, David, other
Ke
than, you
but
know,
keep going. I'm
we're,
going with you.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
talking about, I mean, we're talking about like how did I become the person that I am today, where I have this wide range of
Mm.
people that I interact with. And
Mhm.
and I think anybody that listens to your show or listens to my show
Right.
understands that um I love everybody. Right?
Mm.
Not
Mm.
everybody loves me, but I
Mm.
love
Yep.
everybody, and
Yes.
I take people for, not who they love or what they look like or what their flaws are or any of that. I take them at face value,
Right.
and, that's all I've ever asked of anybody else of me
Mm. Mhm.
throughout my career, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so in a way, I created my own safety,
Mm.
right? My
Mm.
safety came from my core as opposed from the outside world.
Mhm.
And the more it came from my core, the safer I became
Mhm. Mhm.
because more people saw me as Linda
Right.
and not as a lesbian
Mhm.
married to a woman with two kids, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I hope that the people who are listening who know me, they're not shocked by that. I can't imagine that they would be, but you never know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, And what's interesting is over my career, it became less and less about that and more about the person that I am and the ideas that I put out into the world,
Mhm,
etc.
mhm.
Now I want to draw a not so parallel probably with your professional life.
Sure,
And if
sure,
I can go there, if you'll
sure.
let me go there, right?
Absolutely.
I I I I don't think people look at me and say, "Is she or isn't she?" Right? I honestly think they look at me and they go, "Mm, yep." Right? But in general, if I wanted to, I could hide,
Mm, mhm,
right?
mhm,
But not true of people of ethnicity,
mhm,
certain
mhm,
ethnicities, or
mhm,
people of color,
mhm,
right? And so my question back to you
mhm.
is or maybe it's not even a question, right? I would think that your lived experience is so much different than I am or have experienced in my lifetime than I mean, I think that you don't hide, right? You can't
I
hide,
can't. Yeah, yeah,
right?
I can't. And honestly, Doc, that's it's interesting that it's interesting, first of all, that we met. That of all of the, as I shared with you in our discussions, throughout my, my writings, uh, I started off, trying to get this doctorate done, and I frankly just got to the point to where I just didn't feel supported by the folks that I was with. I threw my hands up and said, I don't want to do that anymore because I just didn't want to. And I'm finding that the more birthdays I have, the less interested I am in being in spaces where I don't feel safe and don't feel supported, don't feel valued, period. So, and I've just gotten this thing that, I feel like I'm pretty self-sufficient. I moved, so similar situation. I moved out of the house. So I'm the eldest of 7 kids. My mom was 14 years old when I was born, and she did a great job keeping us all together. And I some of the older folks in my life will talk about how my mom and all her little kids walking behind her. We were always neat and all that type of thing. We were never homeless. We were the kids. We didn't live in the projects. We lived in the subsidized housing across the street because my mom was able to figure all that stuff out. But I early on became pretty self-sufficient. So I moved out when I was 17, and I got my first job when I was 11 throwing newspapers, and I've always been just kind of on my own. So as I've, again, gotten a little older, I started to feel like that on the one hand, I can take care of myself. I don't need people to take care of me and all that type of thing, on the one hand, but I also, want and need people around me who support me and believe in me. I shared, there's all kinds of stories out there about how just that description of me as the single parent household and how that was described to me as a kid. Oh, your family's dysfunctional and you're a latchkey kid and an at-risk kid and all this other nonsense.
Mhm.
And and as I interpret it as nonsense because my family works fine. It works fine. I've never met my dad, never have. But I also don't feel like that. I hear people who've done all kinds of horrific things and they go, "Oh, it's because I didn't make my dad." No, that's because that's a decision that you made, and the lack of familiarity with your mother or father might have been a factor, but it was a decision that you made for whatever reason that you made it. Not a judgment, but it's also not an excuse either for whatever that you did what you did. And so, back to your question about, I can't hide, and as we're off air, we're talking a little bit about, about my son, who's he's a sushi chef, and I mentioned the fact that he's the only Black sushi chef I've ever met. Uh, but for me, that comes up all the time because I feel, particularly in this country, that that's what people see. They don't see the PhD, the 30 plus years of fire rescue service, all the other stuff that they've done. They don't see any of that. They see a Black guy walking in, and this country simply has some issues and challenges around that aspect of me. But like I said, you get to a point to where people can either kind of take it or leave it because I can't make people like me or make people care about me or support me. I can't make them do that. But I'm also convinced that there are people who do. And, and I met someone like you, and I go like, here's another person who kind of supports me, who's telling me throughout this entire process, you can do this. I've heard a lot of people tell me what I couldn't do. Oh, that's never going to work. And that's a ridiculous idea. Blah. Everything was a ridiculous idea before somebody did it. So, and
Yep.
I'm just of the opinion that, well, how come, why not, why not me? He doesn't play for my favorite team anymore, but Russell Wilson, who's now at the Denver Broncos, always talks about this, why not me? So, and that's the
Mhm.
way I feel, even in this environment, the country, the history, and all that type of stuff of, the ways in which we have treated, that this country has treated a lot of people,
Mhm.
who didn't
Right.
fit, the archetype. A lot of people got the same thing. And the only difference is, yeah, it's more difficult for me to hide, but it is easy for me to blend
Mhm.
because, I was raised in Seattle, Washington. I know how to code switch and, be comfortable in the rooms where I'm the only person in the room, which is most of the case, most of the time. So I can do it, but I've just chosen to be, this is who and what I am. This is what I believe in. And, and I'm okay with people disagreeing with it. And that's a part of this discussion around psychological safety and psychosocial hazard mitigation. The difference between psychological safety, Amy Edmondson's work around people feeling like they have an environment where they can bring their whole self and be their whole self.
Mhm.
And of course, the research that I conducted, you helped me through, is a focus from a safety perspective that says that's great to have this psychologically safe place where everybody kind of gets along. The challenge is if you don't monitor it, it won't stay that way
Right.
because of these psychosocial hazards that are everywhere all the time. They just are. And so anyway,
So can I just jump back to something that you said there? And I think
sure.
this is probably I'm going to tie a parallel between what I said and kind of what you just talked about being comfortable, about code switching and being comfortable in a room, being the only person in a room. I think that there are many people that bring with them their psychological safety and their
Yes.
psychosocial
Hmm.
safety,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
As opposed to the room bringing it to them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
think I I think I bring it with me
Hmm.
to a room,
Hmm.
and I hope that what I've done is I bring it to the room, and then I let it infiltrate
Yeah,
into my surroundings, right?
absolutely.
Because here's the thing, and I know this about you just from I think I know this about you.
Right.
I'm not going to be for sure.
Right.
Having had a collegial relationship with you over the last few years, is that um, you're going to be comfortable no matter what.
Hmm.
Okay, and when people are comfortable with themselves, which sometimes comes from their upbringing, but it also comes from a really deep look at who they are and what they believe and how they want to be in this world. When people are comfortable with themselves, it almost disarms other people
Hmm.
around them. Not always, not
Hmm.
not always. There will be
Hmm.
some people who never change, right? um but it almost allows people to blossom from the other side of your bubble that you're bringing to the room,
Hmm.
into seeing you for I, David Daniels, and
Hmm.
not the color of your skin,
Hmm.
or Linda
Hmm.
Martin and not who she loves,
Right.
right? And
Absolutely.
that's a powerful thing,
It
right?
is. It
So
is.
you and I have this really kind of strong bond, I would say now. And when you talk to me about your son who is the sushi chef, right? Successful sushi chef.
Yeah.
Okay, said
Say
that. I
say
can't say it 5 times.
right. That's right.
But
Right.
all I thought of was, "Wow, what a great entrepreneur.
Right. Right.
Yum,
Right.
sushi. What a
Right.
great idea during the
Right.
pandemic to
Right.
deliver suit." I mean, I wasn't thinking, as you were as
Right.
you noted, a black sushi chef, right?
Right. Right.
didn't even, I mean, believe it or
Right.
not, it didn't
Right.
even come into my mind. All I thought
Absolutely.
was, here is this accomplished father who has given a lot of things to his son in the way of psychological safety and being his own person, and
Hmm.
going to be an entrepreneur, not a black sushi chef,
Hmm. Hmm.
a young, capable man
Right. Right.
who's doing something great.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's
I know it
just,
sounds silly, but I
it
mean,
it doesn't, it is not silly at all. It makes me think about this theory, the internal and external locus of control.
mhm,
And so those who are stimulated, motivated, and make their decisions based on what's going on around them, the external locus, and then those who make more of their decisions based on what's going on inside of them. And again, another, of my sayings these days is the longer I live, the less I am interested in binary choices. Because it's both. It's not either
amen.
or, it's actually both. It is, we have to have this bubble of safety that we take with us.
Mhm,
But if the environment that we go into is not what it needs to be, if it, no matter how good you are or how strong you are, it'll wear at you.
mhm,
It'll break that bubble down over the course of time. And
yeah,
then on the other hand, if you sometimes by the force of your personality and the relationships you're able to build, you're able to break down that system as well. But it's kind of, it's both. It's
it
both,
just
and
depends.
they're both important. It
Yeah,
depends. It absolutely depends on who's in the room, why you're there, what the purpose of being together is, and I just think that's so important about keeping that balance. And I got to bring something with me, but I got to take this to a place where it's going to be welcomed and valued and supported. Because by themselves, neither of them, I don't believe, will work by themselves. I
right.
just don't think they will.
The people, though, who see that, right, who see the continuum and who see it, that it's depends, and it's not just binary, and this is just my opinion. I think we have a responsibility to other people who maybe need some help with, filtering through the noise,
They do. Yes.
and,
Yes. Yes.
you know, stopping that voice in their head that says, "I can't,"
Right.
right? And
Right.
I don't see you at all as non-capable, but it's something in your head told you, "Can I do this?"
That's right.
Right?
That's
And
right.
so that's the responsibility that we have for each other to say, "Of course you can do this. Of
Hmm.
course you can. I see it in you," right?
Hmm.
But one of my
Hmm.
friends, Michael Bowman, will always say, "I see the greatness in you,"
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
And that's what we need to look for in others, and we have a responsibility that if we've been there, that we make sure that we're working towards helping other people come either to where we are now or beyond.
Yeah, it's almost this chicken or egg conversation. Is uh, do I feel this way about myself because it's just intrinsic? There's just something in me. Do I feel this way because of the people that are around me who encouraged me, or is it, again? It's a little bit of both.
It's a
Is it a
little
little bit
bit
of,
of both.
it's a little bit of both, because I honestly believe that we come into the world with all kinds of potential and talents and tendencies, and but then we, well, good for good or bad, we get exposed to other people,
Mhm,
typically the adults, who have a lot of influence over how kids see the world. Because
mhm.
a kid, so a kid will hop up on a table and think they can fly, and they don't know that they can't, so they'll try it. But they feel that way about most things until adults around them tell them, no, you can't. That's bad. It's a lot of this kind of negative reinforcement type of thing on the one
Yep,
hand.
yep.
But then on the other, there's some things because they don't know, because there are those natural fears, and I've not really done that before. So the amygdala gets hijacked and they kind of react, with either the
Mhm.
fight or flight response. That you need people around you to go, oh, it's safe for you to do that. It's okay. It's
Yep,
okay. Go
yep.
out and hang out with those kids. I'm here watching. I'm not very far away. So, and the reason why all this is so important, and just so interesting how if you tied together who you are with, this discussion, this is the same phenomena that should happen in the workplace. It really
Yes.
should. Because if it doesn't, people can't be their whole self, their best self, and do their best work if they're feeling like I just can't. I mean, I just, on the one hand, or they're being told that you can't. And they have to have both going on at the same time in this. I honestly believe that the most important role of a person with power, supervisor, manager, director, whatever that title is, or senior person or person with expertise, the most important responsibility you have to others is to create a safe environment so they can be themselves.
Mhm.
None of the other stuff matters.
Create a safe environment for them to be themselves, but there also has to be, so it's a balance between everything,
Sure,
right?
sure.
There needs to be some accountability, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
but not the accountability of my parents and their parents, right? Which is,
Mm,
no, you can't. No, you
mm,
will not, because I
mhm,
said so,
mhm.
right? But accountability for, I want you to be better and I'm going to help you be better, but you have to help me help you,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
I need to know what you need, and I need to be told what you need. And so there, as you were kind of talking about this how people interact on each other, right? I was thinking about, where you are is not where you were yesterday, right? Sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back, right?
Mhm,
Sometimes
mhm,
it's two steps back, one step forward. And sometimes it's a lot of steps back and
mhm,
only a little bit forward, right?
mhm.
But that's not how the world works, right? The world works in kind of this multi-dimensional moving uh atomic particle kind of way, right? And that's also how the workplace works, right?
Yes,
Is you're not being acted upon just by your manager. You're
that's right.
being acted upon by the culture of the organization. You're being acted upon by everybody that you work with and touch. You're being acted upon by your teammates within, right? And so there's a lot of work to be done by everyone, right? First by the company management, the
Mhm,
corporate culture, the organizational culture, then by the
mhm.
leadership that's chosen to be shepherds of um, our youth or our people who are coming into the workplace. But it is a microcosm, atomic kind of complex particle that needs to work upon each other in order to make something psychologically safe. Now that's just the way that I see it, right?
Mhm.
And you have to create the environment for it first, which a lot of companies don't.
They do not.
Okay.
They do not.
They talk a good game,
Yes.
right? One of the things that I've been getting into now is this ESG, the environment, social
Right.
government, right?
Right.
And governance. And they talk a lot about like accountability and how we look at the environment and sustainability in our supply chain. And there are all of these promises about what a company is doing, but there's no concrete, we're doing it, action, right? I'm
Mhm.
not going to say no. There are some companies that do it, but there are a lot of people that will say, well, we got a great organizational culture here, as it pertains to our conversation here.
Sure.
But they don't. They're not checking. They're
Mhm,
not evaluating. They're not consciously working on things. So
mhm,
uh, you made a great share the other day on LinkedIn.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
And I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds by saying
No,
this,
go
but
ahead, please.
but the
Yeah.
Juneteenth ice cream.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Um, and I know maybe this is totally off topic, but um it's one thing to say you have something that helps people be psychologically safe, and you're taking psychosocial hazards, to heart, and to think about like how are you going to remove these hazards from people's
Right.
path,
Right.
right?
Right.
But this was a great example, right? The pint of Juneteenth ice cream and saying, look, we're supporting African American, uh, Black workers.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
don't know, right? But it's DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, that falls flat,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
so don't just say it. and don't just do something, right? There has to be some meaningful path of how we get from here to there.
So
Like, don't just
there's
make a pint of ice cream is what I'm saying.
well, there's a passage in the good book that gets used often. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and I don't agree with that at all. I don't. That's said to be the golden rule. I believe in the platinum rule. Do unto others as they'd have done to them, which mean which means so because the other has this assumption that I know what's good for you.
Mhm.
So I'm going to do the things that I like because you'll like it too. And that's simply not correct. It's not. There are 8 billion people on the planet. We just see things different. That's all. Now,
Mhm.
so back to the back to the ice cream caper. Uh, Somebody thought that was a great idea.
Mhm.
Somebody thought that would be really respectful of others. The challenge is the people that you say you're trying to be respectful of, you never ask them. That's the point. And
Mhm.
that's when we talk about occupational safety in general, uh, people, I don't know that there's a lot of variance on what fire safety is.
Mhm.
It kind of is what it is.
Either
Either,
you're
you
either
have,
doing the right thing or you're
or,
not,
or you're
right?
not. Either you had a fire, or you didn't. It's kind of, again, almost
Yep.
binary.
Yep.
But with psychosocial hazards are hazards that are perceived or experienced as a threat by the person who is perceiving or experiencing them. It is totally custom. There
Yep.
is no cookie cutter is going to work for everybody. So if you want to know what makes me or causes me to feel safe, you have to ask me, and you also have to actually tell you,
Yeah. Yeah.
because sometimes the reason that people don't ask is they have watched, they have observed what you did last time. They observed how you responded or didn't to the last person, particularly the person like them, and how you responded to that. So they're not going to tell you if they don't feel safe telling you. And then if they do tell you they feel safe enough and you don't do anything about it, it sometimes almost it makes it worse
Yeah.
because now I have a new experience of you disregarding my concerns. And as we connect this to more physical safety, if you do the investigation, why is it that the guy or gal ran into the back of the truck in front? Why? Because they had too much work to do, and they told you that. They told you that 6 weeks ago. Hey, there's too many packages on the route, or there's too many machines for me to try to monitor. Or what they told you that, and you disregarded it. And
Mhm.
then when they were physically injured, or physically injured someone else, or damaged a piece of equipment, now it's an issue, and it's their fault. When
Right.
you could have resolved that, you had the likelihood of resolving that by simply asking the question up front. This is what we are trying to do. What is your input to what we are trying to do? Not what I'm trying to do. What are we trying to do?
And how can we make it better?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Not
Right.
you, not me. We.
Right. So
Absolutely.
I want to remind you of a conversation that we had when you were doing your PhD. We were
Okay.
talking about boats.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Do you
Right.
remember this conversation we
I
had about
do.
boats?
I do.
And it was about rowing this boat, right? And
Right.
and people trying to get you in the boat,
Right.
right? And I don't mean in a manipulative way, but
Mm-hmm.
if people want to, let's say it's an organizational boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they want to include you and they're desperate to include you, right? If How do they get you in the boat? And do you want to be in a boat that people are shooting holes in the bottom
Right.
of,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
So that kind of goes back to this conversation of everybody has a role to play in the workplace, whether it's productivity, um, product safety, personal safety, workers, just all of those different things, right? And if we don't take into account as many people as we can when
Mm.
we make a decision about we, which in the workplace is always about we,
Always.
always about
Oh.
we. It's about the organization, it's about the people, it's about the teams, it's about we,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because without the we, organizations cease to exist.
They do. They do.
May not in the short term, but in the long term, the organizational will become so much dysfunctional or so much so that they can't make a profit or
Yeah.
survive in the
It,
workplace,
it,
right?
it'll be like Woolworth yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm really, I want to kind of just cycle back to that boat theory is like, so we all need to be on the boat, right? But if you or the organization is not listening to what I need to be on the boat, then I, yeah, then
Lock and
I'm
load.
going to get my own boat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying to people, that are listening to your show that
Mm-hmm.
it's sometimes it's okay to get your own boat.
It is. It is.
Sometimes it's okay to get off the boat and get into another boat,
That's
right?
exactly right.
And I think what the shame is some people don't feel like they can do that
Exactly.
because the whole of the organization, whether they're psychologically or there are psychosocial hazards that still exist there, they hang on to the boat or they stay in the boat because of fear.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And it becomes this, sadly, I've watched it. Matter of fact, I watched it here recently. I watch people who go into work every day. I had an experience some years ago of driving to work in tears. So much I hated it. It was
Mhm,
terrible.
mhm.
And I told myself, matter of fact, the wife and I had this conversation about, I have to stop doing that to myself, which means that may mean, and again, we had to change the entire way we live our lives. So I didn't have to do that because it wasn't worth it. I mean, there's a book out there called Dying for a Paycheck. And there are
Mhm.
so many people who are doing it today, and that they got the whatever, the big house, the car, the whatever, the trappings of the quote unquote American dream, but you're dying to keep it. And frankly, you're playing into a system that has told you, oh, you can get all these things, but in order to get them, you got to have mountains of debt, and you've got to be kind of shackled to your desk all the time. You don't get to enjoy much of any of it. And here's the deal for us: even if we gave you a pension, we know you're not going to get it because you're probably going to die after you
You're
leave the
gonna
job.
die,
So it's
right?
great. It's great for the organization, but not really great for you. It's that whole mindset that what's more important, me or this other stuff going around? And I frankly, I love and respect me some me. And
I
I
love
do.
that.
I love me some me, and I'm not willing to sacrifice me for the trappings that ultimately aren't going to result in much of anything anyway. And so
Mhm.
no, but it's difficult to watch, to see people in that scenario where, so I hate my job. I've been there for 10 years. Well, why are you still there?
Right.
At what point do you decide that, this environment, and again, this is not to say that the environment itself is bad for everyone who's there. It's just bad for you. That's the
Mhm.
deal. And it's, how do we have this conversation about, it may not be, it may be psychologically safe for everybody else and just not for me. That doesn't make them bad people. Doesn't
No.
make me a bad person. It just says we're just incompatible and I need to find another option. And the same thing from the organization's perspective. Just because a person doesn't fit here, how can we help them be successful doing something else?
Right. Right. And there are companies that do that, right? I mean, but generally they're companies that are bigger that can they have a larger area for people to go
Sure, sure,
within them, right?
sure. But see,
Um,
I'll challenge that assumption.
okay.
I think any organization can do it if it's important. If there are 10 of you, 10 of you, you hired that person. You put out the shingle and said, hey, we need help. You
Mhm.
decided that. You picked them. You decided, what the performance metrics were. You decided all that stuff. And then at some point, you decide that they don't fit. I have some issue with that. Uh, but once you decide, then you also have a responsibility to help them with the next thing. So that might mean, I got another friend who has a company, they got a position. It's helping people be successful wherever they are, even if that means doing something else, because it's going to make the world a better place
Mm,
rather than, I know we hired them. They're not working out now. We're going to get rid of them.
right. But you don't know if you don't ask, right? You have
Exactly.
to ask the right questions.
That's right.
Um, Wherever you were working, my guess would be that they didn't ask those questions, right? And that David Daniels had to ask those questions of himself.
That's right.
And I'm going to have a moment of bonding with you here that I have had several times in my career where I've sat on my bed in full on ugly tears
Mm-hmm.
about where I was and what I was doing. And nobody asked me, how can I
Mm,
help?
mm,
The first
right,
time in my life that that happened, I couldn't believe it.
right.
It was my wife that did it, right?
Wow, wow.
She said, how can I help? You
Mm,
know, you don't have to do this, right?
mm-hmm,
I mean,
mm-hmm.
other times I had to shake myself out of it, but that was the
Right,
first
right,
time.
right, right,
And
right.
boy, it means the world to me that somebody else saw that,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
so if you're a company owner, a manager, an advocate, a coworker, and you see that in somebody else, you can see unhappiness.
You can.
I don't think there's any human being that can't see, unless you're totally self-centered and absorbed, that can't see pain.
Mm, mm,
I,
mm.
that's just my opinion. I don't think that there's anybody that cannot see it. It's the comfort factor of being able to say, okay, I'm going to go there,
Mm-hmm.
right? um, and just ask how can I help? And if you can't help, then you phone a friend,
That's right. That's right.
right?
That's right.
I agree. I agree with that. Um, but I will say that anybody who's been there in the ugly tears of like this is killing me, the grind is killing me, whatever. I now have uh, a motto of I can flip burgers if I need to,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I may not make as much money.
Mm-hmm.
I may not put as much in my retirement. But in the short term, it might be mentally, psychologically what I need in order to get through my day.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm all over that. All over that. Again, in the decisions I've made, particularly in the last 10 years or so, I've told myself that I am not going to be in an environment that is not supportive of me. If that means, and there's this thing out there about, well, we've got these systems that kind of reinforce the unhappiness because so again, my graduate's in HR. I've never been a practitioner, but I wonder about some of these HR practices. Why do you need to know the last 10 places that I worked? What? Why does that matter? What? And frankly, here's how it works. You're going to call all the people that I used to work with, and you're going to look for. Of course, I'm going to tell you all the persons who like me. You're going to look for the person who didn't.
Yeah.
Well, what's the point? What
Yeah.
perhaps it wasn't that I was a bad employee, because that's generally the person gets blamed for the breakup of the employment relationship. It's
Yeah.
always the person.
Yeah.
Could it be that that organization was simply not a fit for them?
Mhm.
Could it be? And could it be that we should be looking for people who have the knowledge, skill, ability, and potential to act or to perform in this environment we're going to bring them into?
Mhm. We have
So,
the spot. This person is this shape, their mind
ab-
is this way, and we have the
absolutely.
spot for them. I will say this, in the last several things that I've applied for outside of my consulting business and academia, that has been the vibe that I get, that
Mhm.
more people are looking for the fit of the person
Right.
than they are for references,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's some, I mean, word of mouth, that kind of stuff. I mean, that is good too, but they're not looking for, let me find something bad about this
Mm-hmm.
person,
Mm-hmm.
but let me believe in the good.
Mm-hmm.
Let me
That
believe in the good.
and I as important as that is, there's a part of me that says that organizations and individuals need to also make sure that the archetype, the standard, the thing that people are fitting into is just and open and
Mhm.
going to give people opportunities because again, this is something that, again, as a person who looks like me in this country, there's been studies done based on what you put in your resume and your name and that type of thing where people won't even give you the opportunity because their bias kicks in and they assume you're not a fit and they don't really know on the one hand,
Mhm.
or they think you're a fit and as soon as you seem like you might not be, they turn it off and want to move on to something else.
Yep.
So I think it's really important that if we're looking for fit, it's once we make the commitment to have someone fit, that as long as we're both trying to make it work, it does.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does. So you're doing as much as you can to help me fit. I'm doing as much as I can to fit. But at the same token, I am different. What is that you need me to do so I can still be my true self,
Authentic self.
authentic, real self? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 I don't think that existed back in the 90s when
Okay.
I first started working, right?
Yeah. No.
Um, I think, paper resumes, obviously, right? Where you kind of just you were just looking for ticking a box and you're throwing them right and left. I think I probably wouldn't have had, even though social media was kind of coming up in the 90s. I don't think I would have had social media because I would be afraid that people who look like me or
Right.
act like me
Right.
or
Right.
my background, who I live with,
Mhm.
that there would be a tendency not to hire me.
Right.
And in the early stages of my career, I was desperate to have a job,
Sure. Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
So I needed to get in front of people in order to show my worth. And I would get, I mean, if social media existed back in the 90s, I feel like I would have been ruled out.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So talk a little bit about we've got, still a few more moments here. Why is it that you think in the United States we are not as focused? I think we're getting there. I think I've shared that the pandemic didn't change anything; it just exposed everything.
Mhm.
And so we've had more conversation about psychological safety, psychosocial hazard mitigation, people feeling, accepted where they are at. But why is it that you think that uh, we don't really have standards or regulations or that kind of stuff? So why is it? And there are other countries around the world that do. So why not here?
Oh, that's the $1,000,000 question, right? Um, I think, and I probably get myself in trouble for this, but I think to some extent our system of forming regulations and the political differences that people seem to have in the last 4 to 6 years or 10 years, last decade, um, precludes us from keeping that open mind against each other.
Mhm,
Um, all sides, all
mhm,
sides, right? I'm not
mhm,
taking a side here, but it keeps
mhm,
us from having an open mind for the good of the all
mhm,
in order to make regulations that are for the good of the all,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And I mean, I don't want to get political about it, but I think that there's political um barriers that exist here in the United States. I think that to some extent our legislative system is broken because it's very hard to get laws into place when we have lobbyists and all these different things.
Mhm.
It's not a good or bad, but that exists, right? I mean, look at OSHA, right? I mean, I'll
Mm,
use OSHA as
mm.
an example. And so
Please do.
and we'll say, okay, look, we are regulating for the lowest possible standard that we can have. Well, why is that? Right? Because it's very hard to get a regulation through the system, right? Some of these standards for exposure to workers have been in place since the 70s.
Right.
And it's only because, not because the science isn't better, because the science is better, right? I'm an industrial
Mhm.
hygienist, and I know
Right.
that most of the compounds that OSHA regulates, the standards of being exposed are much lower,
Right.
right?
Right.
I think in some respects that's because we value capitalism a lot more than we value human life.
Yes. Yes.
And again, that's a personal opinion,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
I like to think when I go into the workplace that, part of your responsibility in a capitalist society or in a as an organization is to protect your workers, because that's how
Mm,
the work gets
mm,
done, right?
mhm.
That's how we make our profit. That's how we make our product. That's how we do good in this world, if that's what your organization is doing. And so, I touched on a few things. Well, one is the legislative process. One is the wide political gaps that we have. Um, we're not even good at making small regulations.
Mm,
How are
mm,
we going to do big things?
mhm,
And
mhm.
then, I mean, I can expand it to things where different countries work on regulatory standards. So let's take an ISO. and say, look, we work on these ISO standards for years and years and years. And then we come up with this, 3-page document of a outline that pretty much you can put anything in. Okay. And why is that? Because nobody can agree. Right. And therein lies the rub, right? Nobody can agree because we're all so different. But do we have to agree? I guess that's the
my opinion on that question is the only thing we need to agree on is what we are going to do together and where we want to end up, not even necessarily how we get there.
Right.
So the analogy is if we decide that we are going to meet in St. Louis and win, so we need to agree where we want to be and when we want to get there. And that drives how we do it. So right now, if we said that we are going to meet in St. Louis in January of 2023, we've got plenty. I could walk. I'm a little bit closer than literally. I could walk there. You could ride a camel there. I mean, you could do.
Mom is not walking. I'm a procrastinator. I'll be there the day before buying a ticket on an airplane.
But that you have that option. And again, it's not right or wrong, good or bad. You chose to fly. I chose to walk. As long as we meet there in January 2023, it's okay. A lot of the conversations we have in this country around all kinds of topics, I think that's our challenge, is that we spend too much time around the process and not even clear on what we want. It's, one of the 7 habits, begin with the end in mind. What do we want? What do we want this to look like? And then back up and figure out how to do it. But we're in the details of, we got to do this thing. And even from a regulatory perspective, I know those out there people who hate regulations. I'm not saying that we need them. I'm saying, what do we want though? Because in some cases, we're not going to get that unless we do have a structure. But first of all, we have to figure out what that is. Is it important for people to feel safe at work? First question. Because if it's not, why don't you just tell people, hey, we don't do that psychological safety thing here. This is what we do. So for example, people are doing MMA, you're going to get the crap kicked out of you, but you know what you're getting into. Seriously. But what happens? You have these organizations. Oh yeah, we have a culture of caring. We're concerned about our people. And then when I experience it different, when it doesn't work for me, it's, well, you don't understand. No, I don't understand. You made this promise to me.
Right.
I came and I was going to do this particular thing, and I'm just not feeling it. And if you're really serious, what you do is go, okay, let's adjust the way we're doing that, because I want you to feel a part of this. I want you to feel safe. But, I just think people should just be honest about what their underlying motivation is. And if you don't want women to work there, just say it.
Yeah.
And accept the consequence. You don't want, whoever.
Yeah.
Just say that rather than, oh, we're an equal opportunity. We love people. We're safe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel that way to people. And when they tell you, you reject it.
Don't just have a program.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have a value.
Have a value, right?
The value.
So, I mean, it's just to, tie it back. Safety is a value everybody has. I don't think you could line up 50 different workers of all different ethnicities, of all different backgrounds, of all different, personal things that they have going on, to have their own little, worlds that they live in, that you're going to ask them the question, do you want to die today at work? You want to feel safe, right? The answer is, I feel like it's always going to be the same. I don't think you're going to ask anybody, do you want to feel unsafe today? And they're going to go, yeah, love that. So if your answer as an organization is, I want everybody to feel safe, which, I think that's a great value, then you must do your best to work with every single individual to find out what their motivations are and what helps them to achieve that goal.
And again, back to the conversation we were having earlier, I'm not suggesting that is this kind of Pollyanna approach that says, oh yeah, we got to make it great for everybody. I believe that we should do everything we can to help people feel safe regardless to what that means even for the organization, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. So
Right.
again, sometimes the safest thing is to have this person do something else because this environment for them is just not compatible. But
Right.
on the front end, we should have noticed that when we brought you in, but
Right.
we didn't. And so if we did bring you in, we got to put as much energy into finding a place for you to be so you can still feel safe. If we're committed to that value, it
Right.
doesn't matter whether it's here, whether it's, the
It's an
business down the
extension
street.
beyond the organization,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Honesty,
Even
transparency,
that's
and
right.
and compassion.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So wow. We
Do you want to keep
uh
talking?
well, I want to before we conclude, I want to have you share a little bit about either. So if you could pick, a situation that is psychologically unsafe, or pick one of the psychosocial hazards that, it's kind of floating out there that you've either seen or experienced yourself. And so this is what happened, or this is what I've seen, and this is what should have happened. So give it just a really quick scenario about even some of the things that you might have experienced at work. I felt this way, but this is the way it should have been. You have a quick story that would fit that
Oh
category?
man. So this may or may not be a good example, but um I believe in the power of people. Okay. The power of people to see, and I said this earlier, to see pain in other people, to see areas where they can enact compassion. Okay.
Mhm.
And I will say that I did have a workplace where there was a tyrannical leader.
Mm,
Okay. And by
mhm.
tyrannical, I mean almost to the point of Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And and the psychological safety of everybody working in that particular organization, in that particular company, um, you could see it. We
Mm,
could all feel it, but nobody said anything.
mm,
Okay. Um, in that organization or in that company, the way it should have been was that the workers were connected enough that they could have done something as a whole to change that leadership, right? Or
mhm,
to say something about it.
mm.
Um, that was the ideal, right? So I guess my question is to you, why do you think in a group of people who feel not psychologically safe, who are um, put in a place where they collectively can see it in each other's the fear in each other's eyes, um, why don't they say anything? What is the psychology behind that?
Ah,
Because what should have
right.
happened was that we should have gotten together
Right.
and made a plan,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Um, but it was one of the most petrifying, fearful places I've ever worked.
Mm, mm.
Um, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's the kind of example that you're giving, but how should it have been? It should have been that we cared enough about each other to change the paradigm, to change the situation.
Yes. Yes.
That's a powerful workplace, right? Where people not so much band together, but they share each other's concerns. They share.
I think it is about banding together, though, to be quite honest. So when in March of 1911, when those 146 people at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory died because of their working conditions, it took thousands of people banding together and going, look, we've had enough of this.
Mhm,
We're tired of these kinds of occurrences happening, and we are going to do something about it. I don't know if there was a singular leader, but enough people had the same feel
mhm,
that's why we have labor unions right now. That's
mhm,
why we have something called the National Safety Council right now.
right.
Is there was an event, there was something that shook our collective consciousness to say, look, we've had enough of this. And I believe, with all that's in me, that can happen in an organization. But sometimes it's going to take the one person. Who's going to be that person who says, look, and who's going to have the courage to be
Who's
able to
gonna
stand,
fall on the sword?
who's going to fall on the sword,
Mm,
and often the person who really can and should put themselves in a position to be that person is the safety professional, to be quite honest. I,
yeah.
I believe that's the role of a safety professional, is to be that person to say, okay, hold up. There's something that needs to be done. Yeah, I know we haven't had an OSHA complaint recently. I know everything looks well, but there's people aren't feeling good about this situation. And if we address it in the feeling stage, perhaps we won't have to deal with, some of the consequences if we don't. And,
Mhm,
and, and it's catching up while it's small. You know,
mhm.
that tyrannical leader, they didn't just get that way. They were that way a while back, and somebody just accepted it, and then somebody else accepted it, and nobody
Somebody
stepped
else
up.
accepted it.
Somebody's got to step up.
Yeah,
Somebody's
somebody's
got to
gotta
step.
step up, and I agree with that.
Mm-hmm,
I think, to some extent, that's pretty much what happened, was somebody
mm-hmm,
stepped up,
mm-hmm,
and they just said, "Okay, uh, I'm looking up, people can't see it, right? But you look up to the universe, or whatever is your higher power, and you say, "Okay, I'm gonna let go,"
mm-hmm,
right? There's a quote, about, you're either gonna step out and you're going to fall, or you're going to step out and you're going to fly.
mm-hmm,
And, that person who has the most psychologically safe bubble
mm-hmm. That they brought with them.
that they brought with them,
Mm-hmm,
right,
mm-hmm,
needs to step out there and call it out,
mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
you know, that's a hard thing.
It's a hard
A
thing,
hard
but
thing. It's a hard thing. And it also causes more tears.
it does. It does. So,
Tears in,
so
tears out.
that's again, that's a part of the process. It's cleansing. It's
Yeah.
cleansing. So what's next for Dr. Martin? The safety struggle. What are you doing next? What's going on for you?
Man. Okay. So I'm still working on the podcast, as you know, that comes
Sure,
out every couple of weeks.
sure,
Um, this new thing that I've got going on is Safeland, right? Which is,
sure.
in the energy sector.
Mm-hmm,
Interesting new role of being an executive director and building something. Safeland has existed before,
mm-hmm,
but we're gonna try to grow it beyond its boundaries now, and hopefully into, a big entity in saving workers' lives in the
mm-hmm.
energy industry, not just oil and gas.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
Writing, of
Mm,
course, right?
right,
Hopefully
right.
something with you one of these
Yeah,
days.
absolutely.
Still working in academia. I'm
Sure.
building a consulting practice. What I have time for, it's sky's the limit, right?
Right,
So
right.
I'm always looking for somebody to hit me up with something else that's challenging. So
Sure, sure,
I
sure.
don't know what's next. The universe tells me.
That's okay. That's okay. Got to be receptive, and have things going on so the universe can connect with you.
Yeah.
So if people want to connect with you, where can they catch up with you?
Oh man, the LinkedIn is one of the best places, right? Just look
Hmm.
up Linda Martin on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, I don't have any more links, but you can follow me and you can
Hmm.
send me an email on there.
Sure.
My personal email that you can catch me on is lfmartinphd@gmail.com.
Hmm.
I have a bunch of other emails, so if you find one of those, you can hit that up too. But
Sure.
certainly, I respond to almost everything that I get. It may
Hmm.
take a while, but
Hmm.
um, lovely to interact with anybody.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
hit me
Well,
up.
that's wow. This has been as I expected it would be. Uh, just a fascinating conversation. It's just absolutely exciting to be able to chat with you, and to hear your wisdom around a number of topics. Uh, it's cool. It's cool. I'm honored to have crossed your path, a while back, and to have had you to continue to have you as a friend and as a mentor. And I'm thinking that this will probably have some other folks connect with you because you're cool. Cool,
No,
just
you're
cool.
cool. No,
Yeah,
you're cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm cool too.
Yeah. The feeling
I
is very mutual, David.
yes, yes.
I
Thank you,
knew
thank
when
you.
I met you that there was something amazing. You're an amazing human. Your heart's in the right place. You're going places, and I think, changing lives, hundreds, sometimes one at a time, hundreds at a time, thousands at a
Absolutely.
time. And I'm excited for your journey too. So
Right on.
namaste.
Right on. Right on. Right on. So for this episode of Psych Health and Safety USA, go out and, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. A lot of presence on LinkedIn, on the YouTube channel. You can actually, you can email me as well, David at id2-solutions.com. You also can go to my website, id2-solutions.com. And if you want to reach out, please do. I can certainly connect you to Dr. Martin if you can't find her, because I know where she is. Thanks. So again, thanks for hanging out with me. And that's it for this episode of Psych Health and Safety USA. You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. To stay up to date with the best content on workplace mental health in America, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and join the Flourish DX community at www.flourishdx.com.